everyone. I am here with Jo Hawkins, and I'm incredibly excited to interview this amazing human being. Jo Hawkins is a medical neuroscience practitioner specializing in preventative and restorative healthcare and mental health therapy. Jo began her career as a registered nurse, midwife, community health nurse, and psychiatric nurse. That's a hard word. Then she transitioned into alternative healing, nutrition, advanced weight loss, peak performance coaching, utilizing the power of the subconscious mind, metaphysics, and manifestation to achieve rapid results whenever possible. She employs a fresh approach coming from different angles. And she also engages in some unusual work, reversing conditions such as diabetes, autoimmune disorders, restless leg syndrome, correcting metabolism, gut issues, bloating, celiac disease, IBS. I mean, the list goes on and on, Jo. I'm already extremely fascinated by you, just reading out your biography and all of the different tools and modalities and everything that you can combine into one, which I think is so important in today's world, that we are able to have so many touch points when we're really helping people heal. So I would love to hear from you, Jo. How did you start this work? Why did you start doing what you're doing today?
That's an amazing question, Jessica, and thank you for having me. It's lovely to chat to you too. It's very exciting to talk about, bringing people back to themselves and giving them the tools to have life-changing experiences and live in a way that totally makes them feel alive and on fire with purpose.
Absolutely.
So going back to your question, I had a near-death number of months when I was a baby. And I think from that, it's given me an absolute fascination for quality of life, for how precious people really are and how important feeling alive and well is compared to just feeling like everything is aching or non-functional, So it's given me just my drive in life. And I had the most amazing mother she was an incredible nurse, and she really, I think, was probably the world's first coach. She was just incredible, and she believed in the power of the subconscious mind. And she trained me as a tiny baby to use my mind differently and to get amazing health results. And then I just grew from there and decided everybody has to be a nurse just like my mother. So that's where I started.
I love that. I love that even she, as a nurse, was aware of the subconscious mind. And, as I'm hearing you speak, the first thing that comes to my mind is, my own experiences going to a doctor and, telling the doctor, hey, I have, these symptoms and that symptom. And no one really talks about that. No one really goes into those depths of who we are really as human beings, and that we're a lot more complex than just the symptoms that we have, right? And just taking a pill and hoping the symptom is going to go away. In addition to health, right? Health is another aspect that oftentimes is so overlooked when it comes to medicine, or Western medicine, if we want to say so. So I love that your mom back then already had the awareness of what a big impact, your subconscious and health has on you. So I would love to hear what's about your life, because you're preaching the subconscious mind, obviously, very much. And I would love to hear, because to me, the biggest testimonials are obviously client testimonials are great, but I also want to hear, like, what was it for you that changed in your life once you started to apply all of this work, once you started to do all of this work?
My mum used to say the most amazing things. She used to say things like, you have a brilliant brain, and if you want to, you could, and then she would insert whatever she thought you should think about doing, And it just makes me realize so often that we're only limited by our imagination and what we believe is possible with the physical constraints that we see as constraints, because they're not constraints. We can transcend any of them at any moment when we're in the right mind. And So she used to teach me the most incredible things. Like I remember being a little girl and sitting in a giant dentist chair, and just having this chair like carrying on forever. And he was going to have to do a very big drilling and filling. And she said to me, so you can either have a local anesthetic, an injection into the gums and numb the area, or I could teach you how to not receive pain. And so I remember saying, oh, that sounds cool. Teach me how to not receive pain. She wasn't saying how to be brave or how to breathe or but not receive pain by transcending it and transmuting it. And so I learned to do that. I was probably about 7. And I remember the doctor being so amazed. And then many times in my life, we moved a lot and I had a lot of dental work. And just having to tell the dentist that I didn't need an anesthetic. And so often they just wouldn't believe me, and they'd say, I'm sorry, it's not possible. We have to do this. And then learning to negotiate with them and say, I tell you what, the minute I flinch, you may inject me. And then not flinching and them being absolutely, amazed, and not only amazed, but I'd watch them almost drill further because they couldn't believe that I wasn't receiving the pain that would normally be there. So she taught me these very cool things. And then when I was in school at one stage, I was told I'd have to wear glasses for life. I think I was about 8. And she said to me, there's always a way. And there's a knock, excuse me.
Don't worry. Jo has to take care of something for a second. She's going to be back.
And so she found this amazing woman who was like an eye physio, who taught me how to do different exercises because our eyes are surrounded by muscles, And she taught me how to exercise and train the muscles around my eyes to accommodate the lens better so that I could see. And within a year, my eyes had healed. And the doctor said I no longer needed glasses. And then I've used those methods through my practice. And in schools, I was a school nurse at one stage when I first qualified. And I used to take the students who were struggling with exams, with headaches. They might not finish their exam, or they might just be overwhelmed with, feeling like they weren't coping. And when I tested their eyes and trained them how to use the different muscles to make that part of their eye stronger, their grades increased by 1 or 2 symbols, and they would finish their exams better. They wouldn't have headaches. So it makes the most incredible difference. Some of these things are very simple, but it's learning that our reticular activating system, that part in our brain that helps us find the things that we are fascinated in and believe in, and brings it into our awareness. So it's that part of us, it's a bit like a heat-seeking missile. When when you're looking at a certain car, or you've just bought a certain dress, and you'll see that same color or that same vehicle on the road suddenly. And so that is our reticular activating system. So she had trained me very early how to use this. I didn't know that's what it was called. She didn't know that, but she trained me in these ways of using my mind. And then when I started my nursing career, it was just 3 days into nursing college, and we had a car accident, and I fractured my right hand. And they had to I had to go into surgery and have it repaired. And then when I came out, I was in a cast, and they very early had to take the cast off because I was in a lot of pain, and my fingers were freezing cold and going funny colors. And they said I had a condition called reflex osteodystrophy, or shoulder hand syndrome, and that during the progression of it, I was seeing different physios and having different electrical equipment called TENS machines put on my muscles to try and shock them and get the nerve working again. And eventually they said they were going to have to amputate my right hand and then at my elbow and then at my shoulder, because they said there was just no way that we could get around this with this condition that I had, because my hand was just dying. And of course, my mama trained me, you know, there's always another way. And so I wasn't afraid when they told me. I just believed I would find a way. And of course, I did. And so I still have my right hand. But if I had gone into fear, I would not have looked for other ways of healing and other ways of expecting life to be more beautiful and to manifest something more gorgeous for myself, you know? So it's made the most incredible difference to my life, is learning how to open up our brain, because when we go into fear, the frontal lobe of our brain, the blood flow stops to the frontal part of our brain. And it goes down to the back of our brain, which is a reptilian brain, which is all about survival. And it can't see a way out. It can't see any resourceful options. So it's in a flat and flight response. And so when we're in fear, we can't see our way out. And they've, you know, done all of the neuroscience studies, and it shows that if we make a decision in fear, it will always be the wrong decision. Always. So learning to see all problems calmly and allow the blood flow to come to the frontal part of our brain so that our executive function can be enhanced and we can start seeing other options, and our intuition opens up. Our insightfulness is taken to another level, and we're no longer fighting and just surviving. We're looking for a better answer, you know? That survival's not really just enough, that there's something more wonderful available.
I mean, your story is just wearing glasses myself. And I heard about this before, but I've not met a person who actually told me they were able to do it. So it's like not everyone talks about it, but I've heard about it before. There are trainings online. The reason why I personally didn't go into it, because I'm like, I don't see the proof. I have never spoken to a person
Oh,
like
wow.
tells me, hey, it actually happened. So to me, this is extremely fascinating, even though like we know how much control our mind has, and we can see it with like monks or all of these like people that just do crazy things with their bodies and are able to sustain the craziest things where you're like, this is not humanly possible, and they're able to do these types of things. So we kind of know that we are capable of having access to that, but obviously, how you say, we're not taught how to do that. And I also think of course you're extremely lucky to have had, you know, to have a mother like that who's been able to tell you and teach you all of this amazing stuff. Like, I mean, it's incredible. I literally have chills just talking about it, because how amazing is it that you were a little girl and she has had such a gift to be able to give that to you, even such a long time ago, where this stuff was even like less available than it is today, right? Today, it's like you Google and you find a million courses and a million things where you can do that. Back then, people probably thought you were a witch or you're crazy or something like this, right?
I think they still do.
They still do. That is true. But ultimately, I think all women are witches in a very magical way, in a good way. And I want to talk on, you know, I didn't grow up like this. I grew up with a lot of fear. I grew up with a lot of like, I love my mom a lot, but I've also had to do a lot of the work of not letting all of that, you know, not bringing all of that into my life as well. My mom is a person, she goes into a worst case scenario. It's like when I got COVID, like when was it? 4 years ago now. The first thing, like she was so stressed. She's like, you're gonna die. Like, oh my God, this is the end. I'm like, oh my God, mother, no, I will not. And I realized when I started doing this work and I had conversations with her, how much of that I have adapted. And I would always go into the worst case scenarios, always thinking like, but what if this, what if that, what if this, and couldn't sleep. Like since I was a child, I've always had sleep problems because I would go into spiraling into worst case scenario. And so my question is, I do believe 100% in what you're saying. But the bigger piece, I think, that needs to be done on this type of work for the majority of people is building that belief that it's possible, especially if for a very long time you've been programmed to believe the opposite.
Yes.
How do you build that belief for someone or with someone who for 30, 40, 50 years have believed the complete opposite?
Oh, I love your question because it's so pertinent. It really is. And it's coming back to that presence of mind, understanding that we're not victims, that everything is happening through us and for us, and it's for our greater good in some way, you know. Like the scriptures say, you know, everything is for your good, right? So it's taking that and going, okay, so if this is for my good, just if, because maybe I can't quite get there yet, right? So if this is for my good, what might that look like? Because when we become curious about something, we're accessing a whole new realm of quantum possibility and potential. Because it doesn't have to be as we think it is. So I think the more we start, for me, studying neuroscience is the most mind-blowing experience because we're discovering more and more that we live in this magical universe, you know. I don't know if you've ever studied, like, for example, the split test, but they did this test with light going through panels against a wall, and the light, if it was in the presence of a human being observing it, the light would behave differently as to if a computer was just recording it or a camera just recording the light. When a human being is watching, light behaves like a particle. It goes straight through those two slits and forms two slits of light on the back wall. If there's no person watching, then it behaves like a waveform and more of a quantum pattern. And when you look at the back wall, there are 4 panels of light because the light is bouncing backwards and forwards. And so in human presence, even light changes. And as we open up this world that we're living an adventure, we are living in a quantum reality. It's not just 2D and 3D, and as we've always thought. There is this magical, mystical quality, a little bit like the archetypal world that Carl Jung says, you know, everything really is archetypes. And when we look at our movies and our beautiful stories we used to listen to as kids, they've always got some magic, you know. There are ups and there are downs and there's dramas, but there's something magical. And so that ghost train can become a magic carpet ride, you know. And I think it's learning to approach life like that little child, that everything can be wonderful and we don't have to be afraid. And when we're not afraid, we can create something more beautiful because we are creators of this world at some level. We are part of it, and it's happening to carry us to new levels, that we're not victims, that we are, in fact, these incredible beings. We've got an earthly side, which is particle and vulnerable and can get frightening when we think it's threatened. And then we've got this mystical side that really can love the whole world in a moment, you know. In this little heart, you can just feel expanded and as though you can just heal all these hearts that are broken and mend homes. And so we've got these two components, and it's learning to bring it together and to really manifest heaven on earth in our bodies. When I realized that that is our calling, is to allow heaven to come to earth in the flesh, it made the biggest difference, because then I'm going, okay, so would heaven have that level of pain? You know, I had autoimmune when I went to the Middle East. I had autoimmune, I had arthritis, I was in my mid-40s, and I couldn't get out of the chair easily. I would stand up and have to walk about 10 paces before I could, you know, truly stand up and straighten my back. And I'd gained a lot of weight. I was aching everywhere. They said it would be about a year and then I would have cancer of the breast. because I had a whole lot of heat mapping done, and there was a lot of radiation. I had glands up and under my arm. And I realized that I was in a bad way. And if I didn't really take hold of the situation, I had lost a lot of ground. I couldn't play with it, you know. And so I did a massive work, and I realized that an old disease cannot remain in a body made new. An old disease cannot remain in a body made new. And I'm going to add another aspect, and that is in a body and a psychology made new. Disease cannot remain. It's not possible because you have become someone else. Our issues are in presenting in our tissues. So our disease is often from stress that's become encoded, or fears that have now taken root. And so as I learned that I needed to become someone new, that I needed to get rid of a whole lot of my shadows and the parts of me that weren't integrated, that I needed to align and truly transform in the depths of my being, and work out what it was that I was here to do. What gift did I have to bring to the world that might not have been expressed yet because of fear, and because I needed to perhaps present as someone that others would accept, you know, instead of my own unique self, which is, you know, perhaps a little bit horrific for some people. You know, if you can do some things that other people think is not quite okay, like learn how to exercise the muscles of your eyes, for example. It's not really a big deal. It's just a workout for the eyeballs. But it can seem like you're someone strange. And so it looks like you're not part of the crowd, you know? And learning to be okay with that, and to understand that their story doesn't have to be your story, and you just have to live your best life and bring every gift, every particle that has been created within you with insight and vision for the world, to bring that forward with courage and grace, because you know, we can't die with that song still in us. We need to bring it out and allow it to live and breathe and change lives and transcend who we thought we were, so that we can really become the most authentic us, the most true us.
I love this so much. And I think the biggest piece as you're talking, what's kind of showing up for me is, and you know, myself included, but what if it just feels so hard and difficult? Like, what if, you know, the universe, the reality does not look how you want it to look, and no matter how much work you think you're doing, no matter how hard you go with it, nothing changes, or not as much changes as you'd like to, or not as quick as you'd like to? How do you shift yourself out of that state?
I love your question. I think this is the wonderful part, because no fairy tale, no epic adventure of archetypal imagery would ever be complete without a villain and without the drama. And the drama has to be real, right? It's got to be real. And so the idea of being 17 years old and losing my whole right arm wasn't wasn't a small thing to face, you know. And then realizing that I get to choose. And I normally get, you know, patients who come to me are normally those who are in a massive crisis. They've tried chemicals or surgicals, and it's not doing it. And they are in pain, or they are, you know, really at their wits' end. And so I think this is it. I think it's all part of our great adventure, because we're not going to feel like we've had a victory without having a real issue to transcend and transform. We don't have the same compassion for others if we ourselves haven't suffered. And it's learning to love on ourselves and not see our current condition as a failure, but to understand that everything is actually for our greater glory. And that this is a spiritual journey. It's a spiritual battle of note. And mostly it's against belief and unbelief. It's learning that there is a higher being that is more beautiful and more wonderful, and an energy in this world, God incarnate, who we can call on and learn how to image in his image and likeness. We too become creators, and learning that the dark night of the spirit, or the dark night of the senses, the dark night of the soul, is there to carry us, not to push us down. And through that, we can learn to springboard, a little bit like a catapult or an arrow. A catapult or an arrow it's got to be drawn back first in order to be shot forward and hit its mark. And we've got to have that vision. When we have the vision, we can, we normally say, I'll see it when I believe it, or I'll believe it when I see it. But actually, it's the other way around. It's actually this beautiful circle, a cycle, because as we learn to envision it, we then start to believe it. And as we believe it, we perceive it, because it will happen in the flesh once we have allowed our reticular activating system to lock into the vision. Then it knows what the target is, what the bullseye is. And once it's programmed with the bullseye of what we're expecting, it will deliver. But if we are afraid, we will sometimes accept a second best or the worst and say, well, if I just keep my other arm, I'm going to be okay. And and that's okay, but we don't have to do that.
Absolutely. This reminds me, when I started doing this work, and I started doing, inner child work, and I went back into memories of my childhood, it triggered something in me, and everything just made sense of what you said, of what I believed about myself on a deep level. On a deep level, I didn't believe I was the one. I always felt like, oh, there's someone that can do it better than me. There's someone who shines better than me. There's someone. And then I realized it goes back to childhood. There were many instances that happened that created that belief. And I kept recreating that unconsciously in my current life without realizing that it was happening. And I was, in a way, self-sabotaging myself. And unless I didn't change that belief, I would have continued, for the rest of my life with that belief that I'm just not meant to be the one, or I can't shine, or whatever that is. And I find this so interesting. And I wonder, obviously, we live in a world today where there is a lot of stress, a lot of hard work. We hear all the time, like, work hard, grind, all of that kind of stuff, which I'm sure we both have the same opinion about that, of like, that is actually what is actually, making us sick and making things worse. But how can someone who's also, I've been taught the same way of like, work hard, do more, like, don't be lazy, all of those kinds of things. How can you shift out of that hard work and really like chronic stress into the faith, into the trust, into the flow? Because, as like, once you start doing that, it feels very uncomfortable. It feels like, oh my God, the whole world is going to crash down. So how do you shift from that hard work and stress into the faith and the trust that it can be done in another way?
That is such a powerful question. And I have to just say that there were times where I needed to be, it was my only option, because I was just exhausted. I didn't have another option. And then it was like, okay. And so I believe in God. I talk about the universe as well, but to me, it's God. And I just would say, okay, God, I'm exhausted. I don't have the energy to worry about this anymore, which is just as well, because it probably wouldn't help, And then say, so I'm so excited that I can trust you. And I believe that you've got my best interest at heart, and I don't need to worry my pretty little head about it. And I can go to sleep, and I know that you'll figure it out, and you'll let me know what I need to do in the morning. And it's been amazing how when I've gone through that release and letting go, that suddenly I'm not in resistance anymore.
Yeah.
Because when we think it's up to us and that we have to do something, we can get in the way, you know? My mum always used to say we must leave room for the butterflies and not control something too much. And if we left some space and some freedom, that's when the magic could come in and do it for us. And then we'd know that it wasn't about us, that we were loved and that we were worthy, because it's not about us, it's about everyone being absolutely amazing, and that this is a beautiful thing called life, and it's a dance of love.
I think that you said, like, that stood out to me was the part of letting go. Because it's like, you know, when you're trying to hold on to something so much, you're forcing it, and the energy is not is not that great and that beautiful. But when you let go, how you say, and you let it go, and then I think that's what you said as well, that like you turn from that fear into that faith, into that trust by letting go, and that opens up all of these possibilities that wouldn't be open up if you would have continued to, like, you know, hold on to it so tightly. I love this conversation. So I have a couple of other things I want to touch on, because I know you talk about fear a lot, and I also know you talk about intuition. And I wonder, I've been in situations in the past where I didn't know, is it fear or is it intuition? Because obviously what you said, if you make a decision out of fear, it's usually a wrong decision. But how do you know? Always, always. Okay, always. But how do you know then if it's your intuition speaking to you or it's fear speaking to you?
Okay, great question. So they're very different. Intuition feels gentle. It feels grounded. There's no pressure. It's just a deep inner knowing, or a flow of peace and trust. Whereas fear feels pressured, it feels hard, it feels like your stomach's in a knot, maybe. You know, you don't feel grounded. You feel like you're in a corner. You feel like you have to make a decision now, and you don't see another way. So you're making the best of a bad decision. And that's exactly it. It will be a bad decision. But with the intuition, it's light and it feels free and it feels expanded.
Okay, that makes sense. So what I'm hearing is a contracting energy with the fear, whereas intuition is like an expansion.
It
But
feels
then,
more like an adventure.
yeah, but then also I think the bigger piece of the work also needs to be of being able to listen to your body and to understand what your body is telling you. And that's also, I feel like we live in a world where a lot of us are disconnected from our bodies, and our bodies might be screaming for rest, and we're like, no, 1 hour we can push through and I can do this. And then we're actually, you know, working against our bodies. So how do you connect and listen to your body to understand actually what is your body telling you? Because ultimately we know, right? We even know like what kind of foods we need if we truly are connected, and it's your body's going to tell you. But why a lot of us can't do it is because we've just been so disconnected. Obviously, even now we're talking in front of a screen. So how do you create that connection with your body?
Jessica, you're asking the most profound questions. So good job, by the way.
Thank you.
And I haven't been able to tell you about this other part of my work, and that is that I ground everything and bring it to the physical for people, and then show them how this can be transmuted. So I run a number of different tests with my patients, and I can do it remotely. So we're living in this amazing, wonderful quantum universe, and all things are possible, right? And so using frequency, using quantum computing, I can draw people's data from their biofield. I can use a sample of DNA with hair or blood tube, or something like that, but I can access a person's biofield. And then I can draw your hormonal levels. I can look at your vitamins and minerals. I can see if you're absorbing things. I can see the state of your blood vessels. And as a consequence, I'm able to show you where the different things that are in your energy field or in your heart, right? The different stresses are encoding in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And I can show you where your different value systems, where you may be overgiving and people pleasing, for example, I can see it in blood vessels, that it's expanding the whole time and it's not coming back. And so it's not sustainable. The person is losing vascular elasticity, and they might feel dizzy when they stand up, or I'm sure that happens to a lot of people these days. Looking at the work that I'm getting in, is a lot of people are overgiving, and they're not making sure that everything is a fair exchange, that there is a win-win happening, that they are also loved perfectly, and they don't have to be everybody's doormat. That when we approach life with the value of it's got to be a win-win-win, a win for you, a win for me, and a win for God or for the planet or for others, then we have something that will be blessed. And it will be sustainable and viable. Otherwise, in your vital statistics, in your vital signs, in your blood pressure, I will see the blood pressure will be lower, or that you might be prone to having broken veins, for example, or varicose veins, or even an aneurysm. So I can see in a person's work and say to them, do you think like this? Do you think you're not quite as good as everybody else?
Yeah.
And they will always go to me, yes. And I'll go, okay, now nutritionally, we're going to do this and this. But if you don't change and understand that we have to love others as we love ourselves, because otherwise it just can't work. We will be overgiving and overstretching, and therefore we won't have enough to do our own mission on earth, And as I do that with people, they're changing their psychology and they're changing their physiology, and we start to get something really dynamic happening, and life starts working for them rather than against them, because electromagnetically they're coming into alignment with their truth.
Yeah. I find this so interesting because, again, a lot of times we see nutrition so linearly, right? It's like, oh, eat like this, but there's so many more aspects to it. And the fact that you can exactly tell what the person is going through or what the person needs to work on blows my mind, which, is just incredible. I wonder, for example, and I know I'm not the only one, when something manifests in the body, right? Like pain, stiffness. I have it a lot around my neck and my upper back. It's like a lot of pain, a lot of like, I can't move my head, like literally just again today manifested, and it's been going on for like a month. And the interesting thing about this is, on a physical level, I'm doing all of the right things, right? I'm doing the stretching, I'm doing the yoga, I'm like doing all of the physical things. And at the same time, I don't even feel like I'm stressed. Like everyone is like, oh, it's stress, it's stress, it's stress. I'm like, but I don't feel it. Like I literally do not, like I work a lot, yes, but I do it because I love it and not because I feel like I have to. So how can someone, I don't even know what I want to ask with that question, but I feel like, because this is a very common symptom a lot of women or people experience, how can someone know what that means in terms of like, if it's just a small thing that they can change already in the day of like, oh, is that causing the pain I'm experiencing? Does the question make
So I'm
sense?
going to come at this from various angles.
Okay.
The one is that I have the ability to scan a person and show you, this is in the muscles, or this is a blood vessel, or this is pinched nerve in the neck. And we can work with that with frequency and with, release work. Also, it can be from the past where it's encoded and there is some kind of a trigger that is bringing it back. So you might not be aware of it. It can also be in our DNA, because we carry DNA, and neuroscience has proven that we're carrying memories in our DNA. Who knew that someone who has a phobia might not have an irrational fear because it's in their genetic code that someone in the family had a massive experience of fear hormones around, for example, a snake incident. And now it's in the DNA, it's encoded. They took a group of mice and they put them on a plate that could shake, right? And they introduced cherry blossom every time they shook a plate. And these mice started to associate, they were conditioned to have the smell of cherry blossom with a shaking plate like there's an earthquake kind of a feel, and they would have a fear response. And then they took away the shaking plate and just brought in the cherry blossoms. And 7 generations of mice later, they were still having a fear response at the smell of cherry blossom.
Wow.
So it was in their DNA structure. So some of what we're carrying might be our history. You know, there might have been a family feud we need to start working through. There could be in the collective conscious attention. We could feel like our neck is on the line in a cosmic way, because there is, you know, there are these tensions that we are picking up on. You know, we're like walking antenna. We are receiving such incredible information. And sometimes we're empaths and we're receiving it for a whole bunch of other people until we learn how to hold it and be a vessel of change, and not just a vessel that is receiving the dramas for each other, but to transmute it. And so there's a whole lot that's involved. And at the end of the day, it's really sort of like an exploration rather than, you know, just not having a meaning or a blame game attached to it, but learning just to look at it gently and lightly and figure out what it is that we are here to transmute, and what do we need to carry and what can we let go.
I find this, again, super interesting conversation, because this is definitely, I think, something that many of us are not aware of, especially the generational thing. Like, you know, we talk about generational patterns and things like that, but not how things manifest in the body as well, and how that can be carried into generations. And I wanted to ask another question, just slipped my mind. Hold on. What was it? Oh yeah, I know. How can someone, because I've definitely had to do a lot of work of not letting energies enter me, or not feel energies as much as I used to. I used to be very much like, it was really, really hard for me to not feel it. It was just always there. I always, especially in the beginning of my coaching business, it was really hard for me because I would take on everything of my clients. I had no idea that this was even possible through a screen. And then at the end of the day, having client after client after client, I would like lay on the couch and be like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. Oh my God, I'm going to pass out. Like, this is not normal. Obviously, I learned how to protect myself and how to be able to hold myself and hold them now. But what would be someone could do if it's like family dynamics as well? You know, like I have a lot of clients who have like big families, and there's just a lot going on all of the time. What can someone do to protect their own energy and not let this happen?
Fabulous point that you're making. And I wanted to just touch a little bit more on the neck. So let's just go back to the neck for a moment, and then we'll come to the family dynamic.
Okay.
So with the neck as well, I would also check with my patients, how were they born? You know, sometimes there's a neck injury around birth, and there could be a cellular trauma that you don't even have any memory of. There could have been a fall. There could have been maybe a car accident. So there are many things that it could be in a time of life, or somebody who is on your mind, who you need to connect with on a cellular or soul level and release them, do some work there. So that's just another little aspect of the neck. And then going to the family members and the dramas. I think it's really coming back to that core belief. Do we believe that people are suffering because they are a victim? Or do we believe that this is something beautiful that they're called to transcend and help others to do the same? If we believe they're victims, then we will ache and our heart will break. And we will try to carry their pain, and we can't. And they also shouldn't, in a sense, because if we're bringing heaven to earth in the flesh, then how could it look more beautiful? Is this pain something we're supposed to have, or is it something that we're supposed to alchemize?
I wonder, how do you, so when you see, if it's your best friend, your family member, and you see that they're truly struggling, and you're trying, and that's, let's say that is a reason why you're stressed, because everything in your life is great, but you have this one person in your life that's truly struggling, they're going through stuff, and you've been trying to help, and they don't want that help, they're not receiving, but they're going down into a worse and worse and worse situation. How can you yourself find the peace within you without letting that, continue to drain you or to consume you?
So first of all, it's learning to break the pattern. So first of all, stepping back emotionally and looking again, looking with the eyes of faith and not the eyes of fear. We only have two kinds of brain chemistry. We've got hundreds of thousands of different cocktails of brain chemistry, but only two categories. The one is faith-based and the one is fear-based. Anyone who studied Dr. Caroline Leaf, this is one of her favorite topics. And she speaks about how when we're in the fear brain chemistry, we actually grow little thorns on our nerves, little edges that are hard. And when we have faith-based brain chemistry, then our glial cells are activated to go and clip off those little thorny bits at night. And we've got a more gentle brain chemistry that's not inflammatory. So if we can divorce ourselves from the issue in a moment and just look with eyes of faith. So first of all, deep compassion for the loved one, for the person who's going through something that is breaking their human heart, and it's breaking ours. And so really being with them, holding them in that like a real human being, and then a little bit of a shift so that we can gain perspective and bring something more powerful and beautiful to the table. Helping them to break the pattern and ourselves of that drama that's going on over and over, because that drama is being magnified. And what we focus on will expand. If you hold a magnifying glass over a leaf and there's a ray of sunshine going through, it can cause a fire. So the more we magnify a problem, the more we focus on it, the more entrapped we can become. So learning to step outside of it and reframe it, or break the pattern with some very silly humor or something that causes someone a bit of a what, and give them that bit of fresh air so that they can think again. When they can think again, we've set that captive free for about 8 seconds. You've got 8 seconds of time to help them see that if there was something good that could come out of it. Of course, there's nothing good that could ever come out of this one. But if there was something good, what might it be? Or what could it be? What would be our best scenario for this? Let's not look at our worst case. What do we really want to turn this into? Because there's a part of us that, when we were little, we knew we had magic wands. And we knew we could ride on a unicorn. It wasn't a fantasy, it was our reality. And so we've lost touch with that magical and mystical that allows the world to be quantum and allows a whole new kind of physics, because quantum physics is very different to normal physics. And metaphysics is different. So when we take somebody whose psychology thinks they're going to die, they will die. If we take somebody who's not fighting cancer, but believes there could be a way out, they will often find the way out.
Yeah.
But if they're fighting it, they often end up worse. So it's learning that we're not in a big fight, because then we go into resistance, but to very gently back off and look with a fresh perspective, break any patterns, see what might be available. If something magical could happen, what might it look like?
As we're getting to the end of this, I have one more question, because I think and I heard this from someone who said that hope is like the biggest driver. If someone has hope, things will change and things can change. But if someone loses that hope,
Yes.
that's when it's harder to restore that. What is the first step? Someone who's listening and maybe going through stuff, struggling a little bit, and maybe having lost the faith and the hope. What is one step that person can do despite everything else that has happened in their life, despite the hardships that they went through, despite maybe having lost the belief in themselves? What is the one small thing someone can do today?
I think, remember the words of my mother, and that is that there is always a way. There is always a way. And if they want to reach out and book a session with me, they would be so welcome. There's no judgment. We have all been in the most sad, hard places. And it's really about loving on each other and understanding that we're all the same person. We're all each other. We're one in our essence, in our being. And so each circumstance is ours. Each problem is ours. Each victory or sorrow belongs to us too. And uniting with that universal part of us that is just love and unconditional, and carrying each other through the tough times, but in a way that doesn't allow someone to be crippled, but to really learn transcendence and transformation. Because at the end of the day, it's who we become that matters. It's how we grow our self-esteem, our self-actualization.
Amazing, Jo. This was wonderful. How can people find you? How can people connect with you?
Oh, thanks, Jessica. You know, I'm on Facebook a lot. I do have Instagram. I am on LinkedIn. I've got a website that's almost finished, johawkins.com, Jo without an E. And it would be wonderful to be in touch. If anyone wants to send me messages, you'd be so welcome. And if they want to book an appointment, I'll go really deep and show them what practical things we can do to heal them. And as we're doing it, we're doing the soul journey, and I'm slowly bringing in the new ways of thinking and the new ways of nourishing their bodies with self-worth and nutrition.
I love this so much. Thank you, Jo. This was honestly an absolute nourishing, super insightful conversation, super refreshing conversation as well, to have someone, be able to touch on so many different aspects. It's just incredible. So thank you for the work that you do. I'm definitely need to reach out to you after this myself. I'm very excited. And thank you for everyone who has listened to this podcast. Definitely reach out to Jo, because her work is incredible. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica.